Forgot to do that last time.
That's okay. We'll make it work.
Yeah.
What a system we have here.
What's good?
I said, what a system. You think we recreated this room like it was last week?
Yeah.
Full recreation?
Pretty flawless. It's amazing what pictures will do. Tell you what, the value of pictures in society, we can go over that for forever. But
should we pay somebody $1 for a find the difference game? Go to last week's video and this week's?
Yeah. Whoever finds all the differences.
Yeah, those are fun games.
I will Venmo you $5.
I would be scared of that though, because there's like a phone game now that all the kids are playing at Megan's Dance Studio that is like, it's a find the difference phone game that.
Oh, so they're good at it.
Just like top notch at.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many little dance student kids that are watching this podcast that I'm sure would get smoked.
Oh yeah, man, we would just be in trouble.
Break the bank. So, man, okay. Last week we ended with a little bit of a cliffhanger. The cliffhanger was you had talked about when to take action and when not to take action, and compounding evidence to guide that decision. We talked about Alex Hormozi. The way to build confidence is to get a bunch of wins under your belt. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you have this evidence for confidence, data acquisition, right? Mm-hmm. And there was this comment about failures in science. And really it's not failures in science per se. It's failures in school that you had mentioned, which is like when we're in school, we're taught some sort of theory about science. We then go into a lab maybe a week later or a few days later, and we test that theory. But our class is only 30 minutes long, right? And so the idea is in that 30 minutes, we have to be able to test that theory and see the results. Mm-hmm. So we acquire all the data we can within that 30 minutes after setting up and putting things together. We see the results or we don't. And we put it away and we're gone. We're like, great, I did science, right? And so what that's done, and what you hinted at last time, is that's trained us to have a short mindset when it comes to collecting the data and reviewing and analyzing. It's almost like we're trained to have a cutoff point and make decisions based off of that. And I don't think that's good.
Yeah. That's
the concept, right? That's the concept, is like, if we pack up a bunch of failures, all of the evidence says, well, it's probably time to stop, right? The evidence says it's time to stop. But that's the equivalent of trying to run the experiment in the lab, having only 30 minutes, and then after 30 minutes it didn't work, and you're like, okay, well, I guess that theory's wrong. Mm-hmm. Throw that one out the window, right? We can't do that. Science is so much more long-term, patience-driven than that. So is that what you were getting at? Was that the thought process?
That's it. The time, and the bounds of time and what they can do to us.
Yeah,
is definitely a large subject, but basically that, putting a constraint around a time period that says, oh, well, all the failures, happen in this time frame, and so the result is I should just stop trying.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's crazy.
Can't say. Definitely gone through. If you cut out like 4 years of my life and you're like, hey, what should you do based on the data here? I'd be like, I should stop doing anything. I should just go like,
Same.
Is like beach bum a job title? like what's the risk there? Like,
take a tent.
Yeah.
Roll out.
It's like it's just, but you look at the grand scheme and you're like, oh yeah, it's fine. So
it takes time.
Just want to identify that, and then encourage anyone, like, you got an insurmountable amount of failures, just keep going, and eventually you're gonna throw a win in that pile, and another win.
It's just the way of the world, is what it is. And one of my favorite little tidbits about the gospel that I've gotten is, and you've heard me talk about this before, when Peter walks on water, right? And Peter walks out to Jesus, and he's walking, and then he falls. And Jesus says, man, you have little faith, right? And it's so interesting when you read that, it strikes you, because it's like, how could he have little faith? What are you talking about? The dude was like, I trust Jesus enough, I'm going to go try and walk on water. Like, he had the faith. But then you go look it up, and the definitions of little, one is small, which is the way we always read that. Mm-hmm. The other is short, right? And so what he's telling him is, he's saying, hey man, your faith was too short. You could have made it here, but you gave up too soon. And that is the exact, having that short faith, that short belief, that short mindset of collecting data before you analyze.
Like little in length.
Is, yeah, little in length. Little in
over
length.
time, yeah.
Short. That is where the science has mixed in our head and trained us on something that isn't right. I mean, you think about it. I read The Grapes of Wrath, which I don't recommend to anybody. Such a dark book. I was truly depressed.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what The Grapes of Wrath is about?
No.
I had no idea, man. I thought like a vineyard and like
You could leave it all. You could leave it out of my brain. That'd be okay.
No, I'm not going to. It's beautiful.
Okay.
It's about the Dust Bowl, and it's about a family in Oklahoma who gets kicked off of their farm during the Dust Bowl and has nowhere to go. And apparently, there was just a mass migration to California where people just lived in tents because they couldn't do anything, and they just starved to death and died. Shanty towns.
Okay.
So anyway, it's a story of this family going through this process. But what's so crazy is whenever that happened, the 1930s Dust Bowl era, that was the very end of farming where you had to go out, work by hand on your farm, put all of the seeds in the ground, and then at the end of planting season, sit on your porch and just hope to God the rain came, right? And you were sitting there hoping for seasons, 2 seasons. You know, like that's a long time of like, I hope this works out. And the data could be telling you one way or the other. You don't know. Right. So all of a sudden we get mechanization of farming, and now the robots or machines can do it all for you. And we don't have that same approach to life or science, which is just like, I'm going to put my work in, and then I'm just going to sit and hope the rain comes. And I think that is a true cause of a lot of drug addiction, a lot of depression, a lot of overstimulation and overworking, is that people forget, can't force everything. You got to put it in the ground and then pray to God the rain comes, and don't have little faith.
Yeah.
You know?
You reminded me of this a while back. I was trying to get a software update out, a set of new features out on the Carcade, and I had set a date in my mind.
Oh.
Because, you know, for Carcade, I'm the CEO, CTO, CFO.
Yeah.
I'm all of them.
Yeah.
But in my head, you know, the COO and CEO brain are like, okay, by this Friday at this time, these things need to be done. And another part of me is like, yeah, I'm a build when it's fun and I feel like it. But then that Friday comes up and all of a sudden I feel this like frustration because it's not where I want it to be. And I feel this like pressure that's all like, ugh. And then you reminded me, you're like, dude, who set that deadline up? I was like, I did. And you're like, why? And I was like, just to push at something. And I was like, oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like it's cool. Like I created all of that struggle and pain basically in my own head by setting boundaries that were time dependent on the things that are really not time bound at all.
Can't be.
Like the success in my life can't be time bound because it's not all dependent on me. Like there are other factors inevitably.
Going back to episode 1, things that don't have the distribution, good ideas that die with the inventor, die with the person.
Yeah.
I wonder how many things are out there today that we don't have because whoever put it together, constructed it, didn't see the results immediately and put it away. Didn't even, it's like saying, oh, the rain didn't come. I planted yesterday, the rain didn't come today. I'm gonna go ahead and throw a tarp over all of this, call it quits, move. You know what I mean? There's probably a lot that has happened there. And it's the same thing. And deadlines, I don't want people to get confused because I think when I say this, sometimes people are like, oh, so you don't believe in deadlines? You don't believe in like getting things done? It's like, no, you should get things done. You should do, you always put in the inputs, always. It's the outputs that you have to wait for the results on, that you have to be patient about, right? So we should put in the inputs of doing this podcast every week like we do, right? The outputs, who knows? We could be dead by the time somebody picks this up and goes, oh my gosh, they were onto something,
Yeah.
But at least it's there,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not going to quit tomorrow because we don't see the rain falling, and wrap it up. That would be silly. But that's what the world teaches us now.
Yeah, it does. Trying to think of how to formulate this story appropriately.
Let them have it.
It's not that. It's a little personal. I think I know where the fear comes from of making things, like, one of the reasons we make things time bound. So my parents had an RV resort. They funded it themselves. It was going all right. It's doing good. There came a point where the lake that it was on just about dried up. Variable completely out of their control. We can't control rain. Everyone's like, you can control your destiny. You can't control rain.
There's always something you can't control.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so it dried up. They took out money. Like, it wasn't enough to sustain them through that drought period. They ended up having to get rid of the park.
Yeah.
Today, it's a very successful business. The people that are there today that have it and run it have not changed a thing. They haven't painted one building, didn't change one name of anything, didn't move anything. And you looked at the data, I guess, of my parents' story, it'd be like, oh yeah, well, they made a bad business decision. Financially, on paper, they're like, oh yeah, you just messed up. Your business didn't make money. It's like, well, if you look at the grand story, it's like they had a good idea. It's in a good location. I think in insurance they call it an act of God, which would be weather related. Happened.
Yeah.
And but now it's still doing good for someone else. And so, if you look at the business's story, the business, it's like, yeah, I've always been good.
Yeah.
My parents' story about the business says, dang, that was bad.
Yeah.
The story for the people that have the business now are like, dang, someone really built something good that landed in my lap, basically.
Yeah. Good for them.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Got it at a huge discount, I'm sure, and they probably looked like idiots buying it, honestly. Yeah. Why are you buying a resort RV park on a dried up lake?
Yeah.
But
and time and perspective changes all the stories in about that same thing so much.
Does.
So much. So applying it to our lives, like when we put the bounds so close, or we put our perspective just like, this myopic, can make things, really dreary.
It can.
Or way too awesome, too. Yeah. There's also the delusion that comes from like, let's just not consider anything else possible.
Nothing bad will happen. This is great.
Yeah.
I think there's a financial aspect to that story, and I don't know what their situation was, but in the world today, and I see this all over Twitter, everybody loves to talk about take on debt. Debt's king. Take on debt, take on debt. I have millions of dollars in debt and I make, $30,000 a month and I'm so smart and look at me, I have such a huge net worth. And they love taking on debt specifically to buy real estate, right? I mean, that's an area where it happens.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened in this situation, but let's pretend your parents had debt on that property and that's why they had to get out of it, right? Maybe there's a balloon payment on that loan.
Yep.
And the balloon came up and there was no income. That debt is the ticking time bomb, right? That is adding time to the element.
If you setting boundaries and time.
It's so important to own assets outright as much as you can. Sometimes you got to take on debt, right? Sometimes it just is.
Yeah.
But owning as much of an asset as you can outright puts time in your hands. Time is the ultimate breaker and maker, right? With time, it will break or make. It's all about how you organize it around yourself. And so, all these people that are taking on debt feels good now, but what they've done is they put a time constraint on it better do really, really good or time's up and the lake dries. So there is a financial element to that people don't think about. They really don't. They just think, oh, I'm leveraged. I can make 30% of my money instead of 10% of my money if I leverage this with a bunch of debt. It's like, yeah, but you got to make that money a lot faster or you're toast.
Yeah.
So
Sure. Definitely a risk. People are like, oh, I'm not a gambler. I'm like, are you in business? Like, there's risk.
Always.
Gamble's a risk. I mean,
always.
Yeah.
Always. Unless they just like, buy treasury bonds and cash flowing assets that they own outright.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah.
How often does that happen?
Invest in your country, like, which is the safest, least risky bet. It's like technically even, America is not 100% immune to falling apart.
Yeah.
I believe my country. And I don't think that's anywhere in our future. However, it's like it's a man-made system. Like it's got things that can break.
For sure.
So
the time element is man-made too, right?
Yeah. Like I'm talking basically without time.
Yeah.
It's like more than likely history shows us that there is a time period for every kingdom.
Yeah. And that's true. And time in the sense of like time is not only man-made, but it creates man-made things that end up being problematic. Like I'll hint at this. I'm in the middle of editing with Phil, who we talked about in episode 1, right? The book's done that we've been working on for 18 months now. Wow. The entire concept of the book, and this is for our physics fan. What was that, 2 weeks ago? Our physics fan, or so. A week ago, we talked about our physics fan.
Yeah.
He's going to love this. So quantum physics has a time element and a time dependent element and a time independent element.
Yeah, we've gotten into this.
Yeah, we've talked about this, right? Where there are elements of the hydrogen atom model and what they call the quantum harmonic oscillator that are time independent. Just think time independent. Time doesn't matter. Those elements give us things like the hydrogen atom, the entire periodic table, quantum computing, and different forms of spectroscopy, cosmology, right? All we need is just that time-independent element. Solve a lot with that. It goes pretty far. It's also really easy to explain to like a person in 8th grade, 9th grade. Then we have the time-dependent element, which is where all the people in academia spend their time. And the time-dependent is where you get into things like entanglement and the idea that, it's not until you look at something that it actually exists, and you have collapses of the wave function over time and things like that become really confusing and weird to people. All kinds of paradoxes that sit inside of that. And the big minds are getting paid to make that crap up, right? They're getting paid to do that. They're writing grants and all kinds of, getting research money to go out and study this stuff and try and understand this stuff. And really what it is this them making shit up is what they're doing. And at the same time, they've just kind of like ignored this time independent element, which actually built up practical, useful things for us. And so that's where, again, man's obsession with time and tracking time and understanding time has added chaos and wasted a lot of our intellectual capital. At the academic level, there's a lot of intellectual capital being wasted because they're so focused on things that are time dependent in the quantum realm. And so it's just wasteful. It's a bad practice for science. And that's what the book's going to be all about, which is going to be fun. And we're going to have Phil too. At some point, we're going to have Phil come in and give his spiel on it. So I hope our physics guy watches that. And I hope he's like, oh, but I'm in grad school. So time independent versus time dependent. The time independent things, that's what matters. Always.
Time independent, yeah. Yeah. Could be really dumb, but kindness exists like time independent.
What do you mean?
Like, I can be kind regardless of my financial situation, my health situation, how old I am, all those things.
Yeah.
My financial situation is 100% dependent on time and when you ask me about it. My physical situation could be very dependent on when you ask me about it. My age, that's the only it's purely dependent on time dependent. It is time dependency. And so, but like virtues are time independent.
That is interesting.
More valuable.
You know what I love about that too? That goes back to one of my favorite aphorisms. One of the old Braden's aphorisms. So I think wisdom's a great virtue.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people see wisdom as being time dependent. Their concept is, when you're young, you can't be wise. You have to go through life and experience and become wise. Mm. And this was like the first aphorism I ever wrote. It basically went along the lines of like, people think that as you grow old, you become wise. But in reality, it's only the wise people who become old, right? There's so many people around us who do stupid things their whole life, who act in the short term, and they die before they make it to get old, right? So we look at old people and we go, oh, there's all these wise people. It's like, yeah, they were the wise ones that grew old. They didn't just like grow into wisdom. Yeah. Wisdom is also a time independent element. And totally. You can be wise when you're young and you can be wise when you're old.
Culturally not very acceptable.
How do you mean?
Authority generally appointed to people that have lived longer on subjects. Generally.
That's true.
And there's definitely some reasons for that. Some arguments to be had. But let's put that one down for a moment. Biblically speaking, two verses I think that are kind of the yin and yang of each other, and it says, no amount of worry will ever add an hour to your life. There's one place in the Bible where it says it will add time to your life. And it says wisdom will add years to your life. And so it's the same.
That's got to fill the point, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're wise, you make it further. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
And it's like, but getting the wisdom is what makes you get further. It's not just you get the wisdom because you got further.
Exactly.
Like the wisdom is the key to living longer.
Exactly. That's exactly the point.
Yeah.
And that's true in so many domains. It's one that Warren Buffett talks about a lot on the investment domain, which is like, don't blow up. Like blowing up is where you lose. And Taleb talks about this a little bit too, but it's the idea of like, a lot of people make unwise moves, and it's the equivalent of playing Russian roulette with themselves, right? So they think, this is where people get fooled by randomness. They think they're playing Russian roulette with everybody else. And you got a gun with 6 empty chambers, one bullet in there, right? And you pass it around the circle. And they think, okay, my odds are good that I'm going to win. When reality of the game they're playing is they got a gun, one in the chamber, and they're only playing with themselves. And it only takes once to blow you up, right? That is the game of life. And wisdom is seeing that and knowing, okay, it only takes once. It only takes one thing. It only takes one drinking and driving incident. It only takes one drug incident. It only takes one whatever. And I hit the unlucky element.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting. People look at the stats, the communities. I guess what I'm saying is they look at the community stats. They look at like general. They're like, oh, only like 3% of people die from XYZ or whatever. And they go, okay, I'm probably okay. And they think that they're playing Russian roulette with everybody else around them, when in reality they're just playing the Russian roulette with themselves, and they don't know.
Yeah.
They miss it.
Yeah.
Fooled by randomness.
Not even random. Like 3%'s good for the
not,
people.
It's not. Yeah.
It's like I probably passed 100 people between my house and here today on the road.
You did.
And probably. So it's like, if whatever stat says 3% of people get blah blah blah, I saw 3 people that will happen to.
Yep. Getting fooled by statistics like that is very, very common. Very common. And so it takes the wisdom to see like, hey, it's only me in this game. It's not I can't look at the general statistics, and you can't ever go, this is another just general rule of statistics, you can't ever go from the general to the particular, and you also cannot go from the particular to the general. So some people make mistakes where they look at global statistics of some thing, and they go, okay, well, here's where I fit within that statistic, so I'm okay. Other people go, oh, you have a really interesting sob story. That must apply to everybody like you. Those are both fallacies. You cannot go from the general to particular, and you cannot go from the particular to the general.
Yeah. I think of how that applies, like, I think of where else that applies or what that looks like. Like, business.
It applies a lot in politics. A lot in politics.
Like, what's good for the goose is not always good for the gander.
Maybe. Yes.
Am I saying a real country term right here?
That's folksy.
All right. Really crude way. This is probably not even what they mean by that, but like, I had geese growing up. I tell you what, geese they're nice. They're fun animals, honestly, in most cases. What's best for that goose, though, is when he feels like he's got to go to the bathroom, he just goes. And whether that's on your front porch or whatever, doesn't matter. He just goes. Good for the goose. Is that good for me, 12-year-old me, who's got to come back with a water hose and spray it all off? No, it's not. It's absolutely good for him, though. Same to perspective of story in time.
I look at the global thing this way. Global statistics say minorities are disadvantaged in XYZ way. Because it says that, you cannot look at a minority in front of you and say you're disadvantaged in XYZ way. That is going from the general to the particular. Right? Furthermore, you cannot go talk to some marginalized person and say, hey, tell me about your struggles. And they tell you about their struggles, and then you say, okay, everybody like you must feel that way. That is going from the particular to the general.
Okay.
Both of those are wrong, and people do that, both of them, all the time.
Okay, so let me try a couple. So, like, everybody's broke for the same reason. And like, everybody's rich for the same reason. People that are depressed are all depressed for the same reasons. Like that, basically.
Sort of. Let's say,
so like,
let's say there's a statistic that's like this marginalized group in this area of the country is 60% more likely to suffer from depression. There are people in this world that will then walk around and see those minorities and immediately think they must be depressed. They're depressed. They've gone from the general to the particular.
Yeah.
Right? Then there's also those who go talk to one or two people, collect their stories, and then say, hey, because these one or two people in this area are depressed, everybody like this is depressed.
This is another this is another data manipulation I've always found fascinating, especially about studies where they're like, oh, we tested 1,000 people to see blah, 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 blah. Well, it's like, well, we were testing a weight loss drug, and so we had tested 1,000 people who are currently athletes in college.
Yeah.
And they all lost weight while they were taking this.
Yeah.
It's like, well, of course they did, because of the group that you used, but that definitely doesn't apply to everyone that takes it, because they're not all...
Absolutely.
They don't have the same variables.
Absolutely.
Their variables are vastly different.
That is
I can't look at my grandpa, my great-grandpa, who died at 99 years old, smoking a cigar and having his lunch whiskey, and think I should just smoke cigars and lunch whiskeys my life.
You know what's very interesting about statistics? There's a lot of things that go into this. Statistics tend towards the average in large numbers. That's kind of a general rule.
Mean the average mode must stop.
So, the converse of that nobody thinks about is the extremes happen in small numbers. Okay? This is true for minorities research. This is true. Did you know that both the city in the United States with the highest rates of cancer and the city in the United States with the lowest rates of cancer are both super small towns per capita? The reason is extremes happen in small.
The rate?
Huh?
Per
capita.
Well, yeah.
It's just the number per capita.
Okay, yeah.
It's because this is just the nature of things. If you have a bunch of, let's say you have 2 bags full of colored rocks, right? And in scenario 1, they each have 100 rocks, blue and red. The probability that one of those bags has 100% blue or 100% red is pretty low with 100 rocks. If you take it down to 2 rocks, it could happen. The probability is a lot higher that one of them could just be all blue or all red. And so this is what happens with statistics all the time, is people find a significant statistic in a small population and they think that that applies to a broader population. When it doesn't. The extremes happen in small numbers. And I have to, this is something that Megan hears me say all the time. Anytime she throws a statistic at me, if it's smaller numbers, extremes happen in small numbers. That town does not have anything special about it. The one with the highest cancer rates per capita does not have anything special about it that's causing more cancer. It just so happens it's one of those little bags with only 2 stones in it, and they both just happen to be blue. Like that's just the nature of it. So it's almost like a meta statistics, if you will, but it's something that people disregard completely. And so they look at all these different findings of minority groups in different areas. And some of them could be accurate, some of them could not be accurate. But the problem is, if you are a minority group, you're more likely to be in the extreme of some category because the extremes happen in small numbers.
Back to scientists get paid to make whatever their funders say.
Yeah.
Or scientists get paid, make stats say whatever their funders say.
Yes.
Where someone was like, let me find the group that I can go measure that will give you the answer that you're looking for. Yeah.
And when it comes to those things, it's like, I don't know if they do it consciously, but it's like they're trying to, it's so strange, man.
It's like, let me explain this phenomenon. It's like, what kind of car did you just get?
Hyundai Tucson.
How many Hyundai Tucsons do you see now?
Plenty. A lot. Never thought of it before.
Never saw one before, did you?
Nope.
Now that you know about them, can't not see them, can you?
Yep. Exactly right. That's a weird phenomenon. I wonder if there might be a relation there. I think where I go with this, and I've written about this was like, so on my Medium account, right? I write on Medium, where all of the blogs for this are. My best one came from a few years ago. Ton of people read it. It was on randomness versus entropy. What is entropy? I got really intrigued by entropy. Are you familiar with entropy?
A little bit.
So in school, if you ask people out of school, what is entropy? They're going to tell you something along the lines of like increasing amount of randomness, increasing amount of distribution, something like that. People confuse random with increasing entropy. And this is where they confuse it. Randomness has no direction. Entropy does. It's like a vector in speed, where entropy's direction is to maximum distribution across all things, even distribution across all things. That's what entropy is trying to do. So at the end of a system at maximum entropy, at the end of it, it looks like it's random because everything's distributed in a weird way, but it's not, because the chase for it is a chase for even distribution. Randomness is not. And so what I've talked about is randomness in a data set. Whenever you want to know if a data set is random, it should pull up a bunch of correlations, not none. Entropy should pull up no correlations. It should be completely evenly distributed throughout. There should be nothing. Randomness, pockets of things that are correlated and relevant that look true, but are false because you're in a random system. And so what's so crazy, this is coming back to the small numbers and statistics and the way scientists do things, is oftentimes they're in a world of randomness, right? We're in a socioeconomic world of randomness. We've talked about how it's kind of a complex system. We're in a world of randomness. There is a high probability that they are going to find correlations. High probability. And there's an even higher probability they're going to find them in small numbers. So that's another element, which is like, really, they're just in the realm of random. They're like in the random forest, and they're finding all of these unique findings.
I'm gonna bring it down, make it really small. Maybe flipping a quarter.
Yeah.
If I flip a quarter 3 times, it's gonna tell me that one side's more likely to hit.
Sure. Yes. Statistically, that's what the statistics would
If I flip it 5,000 times,
more likely
going to say it's pretty even.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Same thing with the beans, right? Yeah, that's true. So if you flip it twice, right? Let's say you're going a predisposition to some genetic mutation,
Mm-hmm.
and you go, okay, let's test and see if there's a minority population that has some statistical anomaly about them that they're more predisposed to have that. Well, there's only 2 of them. So if you're flipping the corner to see is there a mutation or not, it's much more likely between the 2 of them that you'll get heads twice than it is if you go to some larger population and do it 5,000 with, and there's, 5,000 opportunities for it. So that's exactly right. Extremes happen in small numbers. That is like, if I could teach a statistics course, that would be like the driving home thing.
Okay.
People don't think about it.
I'm gonna right turn real quick because when you were talking about the entropy, something popped into my brain.
Yeah.
This is gonna be muddy for a minute, and then I'll bring it back.
Cool.
Big companies today. What do I say? Big companies, enterprises. There's a definite hierarchy in both positions and titles, chains of command, authority structures. A lot of those structures inevitably, just by consequence, will also pull ideas from different individual contributors, and they get attributed to a management or a higher level position. It's part of the just process that it goes through. It's like, I manage 12 people. I'm supposed to take, some combination of those, and then whatever's important, I bring that up to the person above me, and then he's the one that actually gets the credit. Like, that's what he's responsible for, is these ideas. In end entropy, I think technology-wise, it's like we are all individual contributors in the system, making it work together. Challenge is today we have no way to measure that or make an effective chain of command that still allows for checks and balances of us contributing into the greater systems. Skill wallet.
Well, I think us as a whole, that's good. That's true.
It makes me think of skill wallet in the end. But
I think us as a whole, right? If you're talking about a population of people trying to solve a problem like that, you get to the big number problem, which is like we all just end up being average, right? This is so true in stocks.
The world was built by people who are no smarter than you.
Yeah, exactly. We all get to the average, and what you notice is that all big developments come from the small teams, right? It's small pockets of people that do the extreme stuff. It was a small pocket of people inside of Apple that made the iPhone. Small pocket of people at OpenAI that launched ChatGPT. It's almost never a giant organization of people that push something out that's good. Because like you said, really it's like, I manage 35 people. I got to pull the average opinion out of them and pass that up.
Yeah.
And then that passes up. Can't work like that. That's why at small
you've diluted whatever the good stuff was.
Yeah. The extremes happen at small numbers. That is like, we're going to label that the episode here, I think. I could not. That's it, right? All the small startups, that's where big things happen. And they grow into big things and they become average. That's the company life cycle.
Yeah. But I'm thinking really simple chemistry here, but you have to have a really strong concentration. And in big organizations, generally it gets diluted as you're creating your new mixture on the way up as you go up the hierarchy.
Yeah.
Whereas in a startup or a small independent organization, it's like you can create that really strong substance right here, and then everyone else can try it like that without it getting diluted before it makes its way up.
Yeah.
As we know in the game of telephone, it never comes out the way that it started.
It's true.
Never.
I think this also will apply, this will hit home in finance and investing too. Everybody thinks that diversification is key. Diversify, right? Get the average. That's what happens. The more you diversify, the closer you become to the average. Nobody looks at the portfolios of people that truly outperform and smoke it. What's so interesting about those portfolios? Small amount of holdings. That's it. A small amount of holdings will outperform. Not all pockets of small holdings, but there will be pockets of small holdings. You're more likely to find amongst a bunch of pockets of small holdings a significant outperformer than you are to outperform with a big, wide, diversified portfolio. You know, so that's another place where this applies. Charlie Munger outperformed for years, and he had like 4 or 5 holdings at all times, right? Instead of people that are holding 60 stocks and are so diversified, and they're really just getting exactly what the average is.
The power of focus.
Yep.
If I had to research 40 companies at all times,
that would suck.
I'd probably suck, and I probably wouldn't make very good decisions.
Well, that's the cop out. That's the cop out is they don't. They go, this is modern financial theory. I've done enough on science. Let's talk about financial theory and efficient markets. Absolute trash. The efficient markets hypothesis is really backed and funded and supported and pushed by the people who own the indexes you're investing in, right? Everybody's like, I hate BlackRock, I hate Vanguard. They own the world. They own all the companies. And it's like, well, really what they did was they made ETFs that are indexed. They convinced you that you don't know how to invest, and so you should index. And then you put all your money in those indexes, and now they have control of it. Like, that's how they got control of all these things.
They have control because you want someone to have control because and make you money.
You let them convince you that you're not smart enough to make decisions, right? You let them.
They painted a good veil.
Yeah, they painted. That is one of the greatest veils, and there's so many veils in finance, right? The most recent one is ESG investing.
Oh yeah,
that's another veil that I rant on all the time. That was just like, that's for them to get you to put more money, or to suck more money out of people that wouldn't otherwise.
Let's get into this part of the world in our next one, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can do that. Let's not go into the investing realm. Should we wrap it up there? Are we at time?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we are.
Yeah, man.
That was a good one.
That was good. It's definitely